Welcome, friends,
to the How-To Heretic.
I'm Uncle Mark.
And I'm Uncle Dan.
And I am Uncle Doug.
And this is your user's guide to life on the outside.
Yepers! Leaving religion is the first step into a larger, better world.
But it can also be a scary world. Things work differently now.
Never fear, that's why we are here.
We're your audio uncles! And with help from good friends and experts in all sorts of fields.
We're going to share the stories and seek the knowledge to build a great life.
After all, you only get the one that we know of, so we better make the most of it.
Gentle uncle people.
Hello.
Hello. What a day, what a year, what a show. Like it's just,
what a shit show.
What a shit show. Yes, it's going to be a fun one. Dan, you are going to introduce us to three wise men other than ourselves, I think.
Yes, indeed. Well, if they are so, and I don't know, and yeah, I have a lot of questions about what you just said, but we'll get to them in my segment.
And then I'm gonna talk about some graffiti that is for the ages.
Yeah, and then I am going to talk about something completely terrible, and I want to make sure everybody knows going into it. It's the last segment of the show. It is after we're going to beg you for money and stars. It is about the BYU electroshock torture program, anti-gay torture program of the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So please,
all of the trigger warnings.
All the trigger warnings. It is very graphic. It is very horrible. There is talk of suicide and self-destruction and all kinds of things. So if you have any sensitivity to those, you will know right after the jingle, we ask for 5 stars, to turn off the show. You're going to be mad at me anyway, even if you're not triggered by those things. So just I'm ready for that. And then I just have, guys, did you know that we have suddenly like a huge listenership in both India and Pakistan?
Oh, well, hello.
Well, hello. Like,
well,
namaste. Like, you guys, who are you? Like, that's fantastic. So, if you're in India, let us know. Tell us how you found us. And if you're in Pakistan and it's safe for you to do so,
right?
Let us know. It's so cool. So welcome. We're happy you're here. And let's do a show for you.
Let's do it.
Uncle Doug.
Hello.
I love Christmas. And you are my secret. What's the other end of Secret Santa? You're the secret getter of my Secret Santa.
I'm your public Satan.
Yes.
Dude, spoiler alert. You just gave it away. Now we have to redraw a name.
This year, I wanted to buy you a watch fob, but I see that you sold your watch.
And I was going to buy you hair curlers.
A mustache comb.
A mustache comb. But you shaved your mustache.
Yeah. Oh. It's funny how few people, when I make a gift of the Magi joke, how few people know what that movie is. But
yeah, God, it's such a stupid premise. Anyway,
yeah.
Speaking of stupid premises,
Christmas.
Well, yes, it's unavoidable. Christmas time is here. Time for all of us heretics to put on our uniforms, clean and load our guns, and march out into the battlefield for our frontline assault in the war on Christmas. Don't shoot until you see the red and greens of their Starbucks cups.
I'm in the 23rd Kwanzaa Brigade this year.
Oh, we kid, of course. The only actual war on Christmas is being fought solely in the frenzied fever dreams of Fox News viewers, who walk the streets yelling weaponized versions of holiday cheer phrases in the hopes that they will ward off the evil atheist Grinches that they imagine hiding behind every lamppost.
Well, and of course, Melania Trump.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
I really, she went traditional this year. I really miss the the Christmas fright mares.
Slovakian blood cones.
Yeah.
She kind of had to. After the audio came out of her saying, "Fuck it! Why does anyone care about this shit?
Fuck this Christmas!
Fuck Christmas!"
And by the way, Uncle Dan, my local department store, or grocery store, whatever you want to call it, my local bodega, put up Christmas decorations before Halloween this year. So we are not winning this war.
No.
No, well, we're not fighting this war. It's just in their minds. That's the problem. Yeah, I mean, we are the vampires in the imagined world of the MAGA Christians, and the words Merry Christmas are a cross made of garlic to them. So,
Yeah.
Now, mind you, even though this is a made-up war that only one side is actually fighting, that doesn't mean that the rest of us don't take plenty of shrapnel. Your store's decorations being one of them. Those of us foolish enough to happily wish someone a happy holidays run the risk of a very nasty Karen scolding. And these days, she might actually call the cops. Fortunately, this is 2020, so I don't have to think about all the annoying parts of Christmas very much. I always try to avoid retail environments in December, mostly because I've heard all I will ever need to hear about Mariah Carey's wish list, and Paul McCartney's song is my nightmare fuel. But this year, I'm a fucking shut-in. No restaurants, no bars. All the places that might assault me with 1984's condescending racist anthem, Do They Know It's Christmas Time at All, are largely out of my life. Oh my God. #pandemic upside.
Yeah.
Another holiday tradition I'll be avoiding this year will be my in-laws' extended family get-together where they all read about the birth of Jesus from the Bible. Now, I love my in-laws, and the get-together itself can be a lot of fun, but I know that at some point in the evening, somebody is going to gather everyone together and ask the children, well, them as can read, to favor us with a bunch of Jacobian prose that none of them really understands. And when I say none of them, I don't just mean the kids, I mean the adults too, because the story of the birth of Christ is so calcified in a believer's mind that they don't actually listen to what they're hearing anymore. They just catch the old familiar beats and ask zero questions. Something, something, Virgin Mary, something, something, angel, donkey ride, no room at the inn, baby in manger, shepherds, heavenly host, wise men, the end. Now, if you want to really dig into the origin story of the New Testament's big hero, you should go all the way back to episode 13 of this show, when we had a very nice guest named Uncle Doug on to go into detail comparing the differing accounts of Jesus' birth in the different Gospels. The upshot is that Mark and John don't really touch on it at all, and Matthew and Luke tell two completely different stories, like barely even related, and frequently conflicting.
Right.
As a matter of fact, pretty much the only things that they agree on are that Jesus was, in fact, born, and that they named him Jesus, thus somehow fulfilling the prophecy that he would be named Emmanuel. I'll figure that. And that the birth was in Bethlehem. That's it. Everything else they completely clash on. Luke does the whole Mary and Joseph leave Nazareth for Bethlehem, no room at the inn, shepherds thing. Matthew does the wise men come from the east, Herod orders the death of baby boys fleeing to Egypt thing. There is zero crossover. You would think that this kind of total failure to be cohesive would be a little alarming to readers, that some might see that and say, isn't that a little strange? But it's the Bible, so we're all used to it at this point, and rather than abandon a book as obvious as an obvious load of donkey shit, everyone's time is much better spent with hammers and chisels squaring all the circles. They just squish both stories together as best they can, squint their eyes so they can't see the glaring problems, and say, it's all true! All the things happened! The Lord works in mysterious ways. Everything is fine. Who wants punch? But I want to focus on the gospel according to Matthew. That's right. Today I give you the gift of the Magi. And yes, I said Magi. I want to say Magi, but literally every dictionary and pronunciation guide I could find says that it's Magi.
Is that true?
Of course, that's the plural. The singular is magus, spelled M-A-G-U-S, which I really want to pronounce Magoos, but whatever.
It's so strange that Utahns would mispronounce a word.
Yeah. Well, not just Utahns. I mean, I think that's a lot of folks. But yes, Utahns do have their own particular way of pronouncing things. Anyway, Matthew was the first to write about Jesus' birth, and they really hadn't workshopped it so much. So his story is, well, dark. There's no special story for the birth itself. Just Mary got preggers by a ghost. Joseph was told to be cool about it, and then they had the kid. Boom, done. Move on to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is where the action happens. Dudes come from the east. Who are they? Well, that depends on your translator. If you're reading Uncle Doug's go-to, the King James Version, you'll see the words wise men, whatever that means. For me, when wise men come from the east, it conjures up an image of Tibetan monks in orange robes or something. But other versions use that word Magi. Now, astute listeners will recall that all the way back in episode 66, Uncle Mark taught us all about the beloved religion of Freddie Mercury, Zoroastrianism. Now, beginning in Persia, or modern-day Iran, Zoroastrianism was one of the first monotheistic religions. In its heyday, it spread from Egypt all the way to India. So, Zoroaster did pretty damn good for himself for a while. Anywho, the term magus is most closely associated with Zoroastrians. It's also associated with some other groups, but mainly that. But that may be a misnomer, actually. Or rather, an imposition by the ancient Greeks and Romans who, somewhere along the way, decided that Zoroaster, the only prophet of God, who came 1,000 years before Muhammad stole his shtick, Zoroaster was the inventor and progenitor of supernatural power. Thus, when they spoke of what had become a priest caste in Persia and surrounding areas, they called them Magi, and that word eventually evolved, and the word for hocus pocus type stuff became magic.
Yeah.
So, who were these Persian Zoroastrian magicians who came from the east to meet Jesus? Well, we don't know. We don't even know how many of them there were. We know it's more than one because the Bible uses the plural when talking about them. So, literally, it could be anything from 2 to whatever. 200? Who the fuck knows? It's likely that the reason people assumed there were 3 was just because the Bible mentions the 3 presents that they gave to Jesus.
Right.
As though 2 guys couldn't give 3 presents, or 10 guys. Literally, any number of people can present a person with 3 gifts. So
Yeah.
it's not really very good logic. Whatever. Anyway, the mysterious people from the East were known to be fascinated by astrology, so it makes sense that Matthew decided that what would have caught the Magi's collective eyes would be a new star. So, these dudes show up in downtown Jerusalem and start asking around if anyone knows where they can find a baby who will be the king of the Jews. They saw this star, so, he's got to be around here somewhere, and we want to worship him. Which seems a little odd that members of the priest caste of a totally different monotheistic religion would totally turn their back on a god based on a star, but then this is a Christian's book, and there is nothing a Christian loves more than a convert story, so... the problem is that, well, you see, the Jews, they already had themselves a king, specifically Herod, and he had kids. And if there's one thing kings hate, it's the idea that someone who isn't them or their kids might unking them.
Yeah.
So when Herod hears that these Magoos are asking around about a baby Jew king, he gets a little agitated. But he's sly about it, right? So he goes to his priests and says, do we know anything about a baby? About what are they talking about? And his priests come up with, they check with all the prophecies, and somebody's like, hey, here's one about a ruler popping up in Bethlehem. Maybe that's it. And they all agree that that's probably right. So Herod summons the Magi to him and says, hey, this King of the Jews kid sounds totally super cool. I am way on board. So, as a matter of fact, my guys say he's probably in Bethlehem, which is just 5.5 miles that way. But will still take you forever to get there with traffic. Anyway, off you go, and definitely let me know when you find him. So I can worship him too. Wink.
Yeah, like I'm not going to kill him. Why do you?
Yeah,
why
exactly.
would you? Yeah.
You said that. I didn't say that. I'm not going to kill. You're going to kill him.
Wouldn't it be weird if we killed him? Maybe we just kill him.
Wouldn't that be? That'd be weird, right? We probably shouldn't. Do we want to? No, we don't want to.
Oh, you're so bad.
Are we the baddies?
Anyway, these Magi say, "You betcha," and head to Bethlehem, guided by the star. Which, if you're traveling over 1,000 miles across a desert, a star might be very helpful. But when what you're going is basically from the Upper West Side to a specific address in Tribeca, a star really shouldn't be that helpful.
No.
It reminds me of that scene where Chief Wiggum was trying to tell the operator where he was in his police car. And he said, "I'm under the Earth's sun now."
I'm under the Earth's sun now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And in this case, it's not, so this is a very special star because the Bible literally says that the star went on ahead of them and then stopped over Jesus's house.
I think that was Tinkerbell.
Yeah, exactly. A drone, maybe.
Could
Who
have been a
knows?
drone.
Whatever the fuck they were following, it sure as hell wasn't a star. But God, miracles, whatever. So they find the kid with his mom, no mention of a manger at all, and they fall down and worship him. They give the 3 gifts, gold, Frankenstein, and myrrh. And then, having found the Messiah, the literal living embodiment of God, whom they had traveled for months to find, and possibly years even, and whom they immediately worshipped, they left.
Yeah.
Because that's what you do when you find the Messiah. You've beaten the game. You found the princess in the castle. There's nothing left to do. I guess he is a baby. It's not like he's going to teach you anything. You might as well go home, right?
Yeah. To turn around and leave.
All right.
leave.
We'll be back when he's grown.
Right, yeah, exactly. No.
I know, they never come
They
back.
won't.
I wonder if
They're done.
I wonder if they asked Mary, "Hey, we've come a long way and it's the middle of the night. Do you know any inns around here that might have some space for us? Like we're
Right. No, and, there is no explicit timeline here, so this could have been years after the baby was born.
Yeah.
And a lot of scholars theorize that it's a couple years after he was born. It doesn't matter, but it doesn't say anything about it. It could be that night. It could have been you never know. So, anyway, having had a tip-off in a dream that Herod is a dick, they duck out the back way and head into the night, never to be heard from again.
Yeah, that's the end of them in the story, isn't it? They're just gone.
Well, yeah, for them, they are done. That's a wrap on Wise Men. Thank you, everybody, and everyone applauds. Now, this sets off a very Game of Thrones-esque string of events. Joseph has a dream that tells him that they aren't safe, so he grabs Mary and the baby, and they fuck off immediately to Egypt, which the Gospel of Luke makes zero mention of, by the way. Then Herod, furious that his ruse didn't work on the Magi, goes full Pharaoh and orders that every boy under the age of 2 in and around Bethlehem be killed. And that's it.
Good night, honey.
Matthew clearly hadn't gotten the memo that the New Testament was supposed to be more fun and upbeat than the old one, so Luke had to swoop in and do a huge rewrite that makes it all a lot more celebratory. But they all felt a little too bad to just throw away Matthew's work, and that's why you don't write your scripture by committee.
Yeah. I don't know why, but it just makes me think about all the times people ask me as an atheist where my morality could possibly come from.
It's weird.
Yeah. I don't know why, I just thought of that.
It's a valid question, though, because they have this great book of theirs that tells very clear stories about morality.
Yeah.
And
Well,
don't
and
be a
it's-
dick. I think that's what the Bible really comes down to: is don't be an uncircumcised dick.
That's what the second half of the Bible. The first half of the Bible is dickishness is totally fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny because this story has like all the disparate elements of this story that are only in one place or another have coalesced into this single narrative that you could, any Christian can rattle off.
Yeah.
Right? But it's like, okay, that didn't come from that book, and that didn't come from that book, and those two things happened at the same time, so one of them couldn't have,
Right.
etc. But it's like, that just is accepted.
Yeah, literally, in Matthew, there's no mention of, like, in Matthew, so here's the thing, and Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew is amazing because it keeps saying, and then this and this and this happened, and that fulfills the prophecy of this. It's literally just writing to make sure that all of the messianic prophecies
Right.
are fulfilled in the story. But the problem is that, like, then Luke goes and tries to do the same thing, but he fulfills the prophecies in different ways. So
Yeah.
whereas Matthew has everybody run away to Egypt for years, probably, and then swing back into to Israel, and they go to Nazareth, and that's when Jesus fulfills the prophecy of being a Nazarene.
Right.
In
Yeah.
Luke, they start in Nazareth. Then the whole ruse, the idiotic ruse of the census,
Yeah.
and then they go to Bethlehem. So both of them have to fulfill both the Nazareth and the Bethlehem prophecies, but they do it in literally totally different ways, and nobody seems to care.
When I talk to those Christians outside of Temple Square about this, is one of the things I brought up is like, the origin story is completely contradictory. And they were just
No, it isn't.
No, it isn't. Like, it is.
It
says-
is. I mean, not even from a critical sensibility.
Yeah, it's just
No.
he went to Egypt in this book, and he didn't. He went somewhere else in this book.
In the next
Yeah.
book.
You can't.
It's 2 books over, and he's literally a totally different story.
Yeah.
So there
Starting
you go.
to think there might not be so much to this as we thought.
Yeah.
let's-
I mean,
let's
you
give
know,
up.
It's probably us that's wrong in the
Let's
end.
let's turn back.
Well, okay. Well, everybody go find a star to follow.
Yes.
And try to avoid bad
And
music.
startle a mother and their newborn with very bizarre gifts, and then just leave.
and then just
That's the Christmas spirit.
fuck off.
Yeah,
All
fuck
right.
off.
That's it.
Bye.
Let's move on. Hey, Uncle Mark.
Yes.
When was the last time you did any good graffiti?
Oh, it's been a while. I've done some in my life. But
I feel like it's an art that is not taken as seriously as perhaps it should be, because it's mostly stupid.
yes, most of it is completely terrible, and I can tell you, as many times as I've had to clean it off my garage here. But yes, but there is some beautiful work in the field.
Yes.
There is.
Yeah.
And we should be lucky
ain't
that-
talking about no Banksy.
No.
Exactly. No, there's only one Banksy,
Yeah.
and everyone else should stop painting shit. Well, dear uncles, I'll take it from here.
Okay.
Sometimes subjects for this show manifest themselves in online articles or listener recommendations, or from throwing a dart at our enormous spreadsheet of possible topics.
Yeah.
But sometimes they just freaking happen to us. Although not sufficient for its own segment, something did happen to me the other day that directly relates to a segment we did way back in episode 51. In that episode, I talked about one Parley P. Pratt.
Oh yes, I forgot about this.
How did you forget about this?
I don't know. I can't remember anything these days.
True. He was the portly wife-stealing apostle whose murder at the hands of the husband of one of those wives he stole in Arkansas in 1857 precipitated the Mountain Meadows Massacre, one of the darkest chapters in all of Mormon history. I mentioned in that segment that only blocks from my house there was a statue of the long-departed Parley
Yes.
in the corner of the parking lot of my local grocery store. The reason for this location is that it is directly under the shadow of the mouth of Parley's Canyon, so named because Parley charted that route during the Mormon migration. For those not familiar with the canyon, it runs directly east out of the Salt Lake Valley and is the primary route to Park City, Utah, and eventually Wyoming
and Colville.
and Colville.
Yeah.
And if
Sure.
you keep
He'll
going.
take you to
Hennifer?
Colville.
Yep.
If you need to get to Hennifer, that's
Yeah.
going to be your best route.
If you keep going, you're going to run into Wyoming at some point.
Yeah. And nobody
it's-
wants you to run into Wyoming.
Nope. Least of all people in Wyoming.
Right.
It's a breathtaking canyon, truly. It is known also as one of the most treacherous stretches of highway in the country for semi-trucks.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Enjoy. There are a couple runaway truck ramps in the canyon, and more than a couple times I've seen semis, some way up it, having lost their brakes. All this is to say, the other day I went to buy groceries and noticed something missing.
The statue was just fucking gone.
Mainly,
right?
it was gone. I walked over to investigate, and it looked like the statue and the granite rocks upon which it was perched had been scraped off the face of the earth. This was because they had been scraped off the face of the earth. A semi lost its brakes in Parley's Canyon, and instead of using one of the ramps, they decided to take it out on poor Parley himself.
Yeah.
Uncle Mark.
Well, he was well into the city at that point, right? Like, he could have really fucking killed a lot of people if he...
I'm trying to figure out how coming out of that canyon to get kind of into the Parley's where he ended up. You got to make some pretty daring turns. So this guy, I guess, didn't have much of a choice, right? He lost his brakes.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah. So Uncle Mark tweeted out the article a few days ago about this. No one was hurt, but the confluence.
He did get hurt. He did go to the hospital, but I think he's okay.
Yeah, not permanently hurt.
Yeah.
Parley was hurt pretty bad.
Parley was atomized.
Yeah.
Parley was utterly and totally destroyed. It's lovely. So I just seem too rich not to mention here, and well, this is not the subject I want to talk about today. I will keep an eye on that corner.
But we do have to mention my tweet that I said if that truck had Arkansas plates, then I'd have to believe in God again. That's a Mormon deep cut, you guys.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Well, if he makes an appearance, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
And to come full circle, I will bookend this segment with another Mormon reference. So let's get to the actual subject for today's segment. Deep in the heart of the Chiribiquete National Park, I'm sure I nailed it, the largest national park in Colombia and the largest tropical rainforest park in the world, clocking in at an astounding 43,000 square kilometers, or 17,000 square miles if you're not into that whole gay metric system.
Yeah, so gay.
There is a small depression in the forest called Cerro Campana, where the white limestone has been exposed for tens of thousands of years. On this particular wall, a group of archaeologists and filmmakers had discovered, we'll come back to that, what they are calling the Sistine Chapel of the Ancients. It's a collection of thousands of pictographs and petroglyphs, some dating back possibly as far as 20,000 years, but are generally thought to be closer to 12,500 years old.
Wow.
Meaning they were begun by some of the very first people to have ever entered the Amazon rainforest. And in case you're wondering...
I think you mean...
The Jaredites.
submarine Jews, right?
Yeah,
That's
the
right.
Jaredites.
Yeah.
Doug, you almost made a terrible mistake. Can you believe it?
I'm telegraphing pretty hard where this is going to end up, aren't I? So, in case you're wondering, a petroglyph is an image carved into the stone, and a pictograph is a drawing or painting on the rock, usually made with pigments or charcoal. Pictographs are more commonly found in caves because wind and water will usually weather them away on exposed surfaces. This makes the Chiribiquete find all the more amazing, as it's primarily pictographs that have somehow survived thousands of years exposed in one of the wettest places in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you haven't looked this up, I highly encourage you to pull up the images of these or look at them later. They're truly amazing.
Yeah.
We should put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, perfect. They are unfortunately a little bit hard to date because the artists use pigments derived from plants rather than charcoal, which can be dated pretty accurately by radiocarbon dating. That's how the scientists were able to so accurately date the cave paintings in is it Lascaux or Lascaux?
Lascaux, yeah.
Lascaux, France. Indeed, these paintings are eerily similar to those ones in Colombia and around from about the same time. And so
The
it's
ones in France, you mean?
the ones in France and Colombia were etched in similar, eras. And it's kind of amazing to think about how, the people who arrived in Colombia and the people who arrived in France, how disparate they were in geography, and basically were painting the same things. So those French paintings were chronicled in Werner Herzog's gorgeous 2010 documentary, The Cave of Forgotten Dreams.
Yeah, not Lascaux, but a cave that had been discovered more recently. Because Lascaux's been known for quite a long time, but I can't remember the name of the cave.
Yeah, I've forgotten. If you haven't seen that documentary yet, I cannot recommend it highly enough. Not only to hear Herzog's captivating accent, but for one of the most off-the-wall endings to a documentary I've ever seen.
You don't watch enough Herzog documentaries. He always has to pull some ending. Like, did you see the new one about meteorites?
Not yet.
Yeah, watch. It's great, and it's
The bear kills him. Spoiler alert.
The bear kills him.
So one of the ways scientists have been able to date these paintings, at least roughly, is due to what they depict. There are depictions of many animals, including jaguars, crocodiles, deer, fish, turtles, lizards, and birds, which are all species still roaming the jungle. But there are also depictions of mastodons, a paleolama, which is a kind of camelid, giant sloths, and ice age horses.
It's a llama who's an asshole and never shuts up about their fucking diet.
So all these animals went extinct about 12,000 years ago in what was probably not a coincidence. They may have all been hunted to extinction by the very people who painted these likenesses. There are depictions of what look like either rituals or hunts or both. Around many of these larger animals are tiny human figures with their arms held high. It's hard to tell if they are worshiping the giant beasts or trying to fell them, and maybe there was no difference.
That's a bad form of worship. If you ask me, if I were a god, I would be like, no, please don't kill me as your
Maybe
worship.
they were just trying to get their attention. Hey,
hey,
over here.
Yeah, that's all. Bye.
Bye-bye. There are also depictions of hallucinogenic plants. There's tons of handprints and crazy designs and possible mystical animals or gods. There's figures that are unrecognizable. And so many penises.
So it was done by 12-year-old boys.
Yeah, because no matter what era you're from, if there's graffiti, you're going to have a dick.
You're going to have a dick.
It's just going to happen.
It seems these ancient artists had come to paint penises and chew bubblegum, and they were all out of bubblegum. Nearly every male figure is depicted either with a flaccid or erect penis, and if these depictions are in any way accurate, then these dudes had nothing to compensate for. How some of these paintings were done is also a mystery. There are paintings upwards of 50 feet off the jungle floor that modern scientists can only view using drones. However, again, the answer might be in the art itself. There are depictions of what appear to be wooden towers, and maybe even people bungee jumping off them.
Oh, fun!
Yeah, this ritual known as land diving is still practiced by tribes on Pentecost Island and Vanuatu, off the coast of Australia.
I was just trying to remember where that was that they do that crazy thing.
Yeah, if you've never seen it, go to YouTube and watch it. It's
scary as fuck.
Something, yeah.
Yeah.
These guys leap off the top of these, kind of bamboo scaffoldings, and they try and actually tap their head on the ground. and apparently the G-forces endured by the jumpers has only been exceeded in human history by jet pilots.
Wow.
So it's just... It's a weird thing.
Their stop gets arrested so suddenly at the last second, you're sure they're going to die.
Yeah.
Well, dudes know how to party.
Yeah. And it turns out this practice might have been, on both sides of the globe. Scientists believe that the paintings were originally done by the ancestors of the Carajona tribe. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that. There is not a lot known about this tribe except that, like many other tribes in the region, the Spanish found them to be very killable. When contact was first made by a Spanish soldier in 1790, they were estimated to number around 15,000. Today, the estimate is around 60.
Yeah.
60. Yeah, they have been pretty much decimated. Before being destroyed by disease and the rubber boom, which was one of the biggest things to, do lasting damage to the Amazon, they were a fierce and feared tribe and a regional power who often ate their enemies. In fact, one of the driving forces behind the creation of the Chiribiquete Park in the first place was to try and preserve what's left of the Carajona and the many other tribes in that region. Local indigenous rights activists have, as you might imagine, mixed feelings about the discovery for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
These paintings have been sighted all over the Amazon, and this discovery is only unique in its size and scope. The worry that this become a tourist destination, particularly in the time of COVID, has locals understandably worried.
Yeah.
Toss on the pile that these mostly white scientists and filmmakers are claiming credit for discovering these paintings that local tribes have known about all along.
Right.
But before you pack... What's
But
that?
like, look, in the English language, discover means white dude saw it first.
Yeah.
Yep.
First time a white dude saw it. That's what that word means.
We don't make the rules, Doug.
That's true. Don't hate the player.
We just benefit from them.
That's right. But before you pack up the camper and head down there, this region is not for the faint of heart. Not only is the area lousy with caimans, if you don't know what those are, they're little alligators.
They're cute little crocodiles.
Big enough.
Plenty big. It's also home to the Lachesis, a.k.a. the Bushmaster, the deadliest snake in the Americas, whose venom has an 80% mortality rate. And, of course, there are spiders there, so I won't be going. This is also an area in which the FARC, or Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia, have been active for decades. Whatever you may or may not know about the FARC, one thing is for certain, you do not want to meet them in person.
Yeah, because they're spiders.
They're not afraid of spiders. That's what makes them scary.
That's pretty scary to me. Although they disbanded in 2017, winding up a guerrilla army that's been hiding in the jungle since the 60s can take a while.
Yeah.
And not for nothing, but legends persist of cannibalism in what's left of the Kirajona tribe. So it's a lovely region. All this is to say, although some effort was expended to preserve some semblance of the Kirajona religion, language, and culture, which almost certainly would have given us some insight into the original artists of that and their religion, most of it is lost. And the remaining Kirajona, being mostly elderly and threatened with habitat destruction, what's left of their culture, religion, language, everything might be gone in less than a generation.
Wow.
It seems like the largest section of the graveyard of the gods are the countless unmarked gravestones of the myriad gods whose names, attributes, and stories are forever lost. This seems to be the unfortunate case of these artists and the beliefs that motivated them and gave them such Carl Hungus-level penises. Now, I mentioned I would bookend this segment with something Mormon, and longtime listeners will have no trouble seeing how a 12,500-year-old cave painting in the Colombian Amazon has a direct, if altogether silly, connection to our local real estate development agency masquerading as a religion. This is, of course, because the founding document of the Mormon faith, the Book of Mormon, purports to be the comprehensive history of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, who were, of course, a single family of Jews that landed on the continent about 600 BCE. And before you at me that the Jaredites came to America in wooden submarines 1,000 years before Nephi, as Uncle Mark chronicled in episode 146, remember, that defense makes you sound very silly. And even
Don't
still,
use that defense.
That's right.
Yeah. Use all the other Mormon defenses. Those sound
that-
really, really good.
Yeah, you're outing yourself a little bit with that. And even still, these paintings predate even Mohanre Moriankumer by 10,000 years. And as the Book of Mormon mentions elephants and horses, seeing paintings of these very animals on this very continent may give a Mormon a glimmer of hope. Once again, these animals went extinct on this continent 10,000 years before the Book of Mormon even begins. And so, for the 1,000th time, evidence has been unearthed of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, and once again, it disgraces the Book of Mormon. Not one piece of evidence, not one, has ever been found to confirm anything the Book of Mormon says, including this. So,
Yeah.
Mormons, why do you keep hitting yourselves?
I've been seeing I just watched a whole bunch of intolerably smug videos made by the fairmormon.org group that would beg to differ and make and mock you mercilessly for your stupidity. No, you're the one that's dumb.
I haven't had the stomach to watch those yet. They just seem horrendous, but
They really are. They're a nightmare.
yeah.
So, yeah, that's. I mean, the coffin for the Book of Mormon has to be mostly nails at this point. But
Right?
but yeah, there it is. These are these mysterious and beautiful paintings by a soon to be completely vanished group of people are quite something.
Even if it was them, and there's no real solid proof, right, that it was them.
there's anthropologically they suspect that these people, that tribe has
Has
basically
been there for that long.
yeah. Yep.
There you go.
There you
Wow.
go.
All right, we'll go vandalize some rock art, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Fellow uncles,
Well, hello.
this is the moment in the show when we express our sincerest gratitude to the gas in our engine, the wind beneath our wings, the patrons of this fine
The
program.
gas in Rudy's underpants.
Yeah, exactly. The mops that clear up our melting hair, our patrons, and we have some new ones. It's a bumper crop this week.
Yes, thank you so much, you guys.
Let's get to thanking. Thanks first to Micronix.
Nice name.
Thanks to Kayla, to Kellum. No, I'm not going to thank Kellum yet. We're going to get back to Kellum. To Vivian, Jordan, Ben the Heretic, and Rachel. And we have some saints to bestow. So, I think I should do the first saint, and that is for Kellum.
Now can I just between us, can I tell you a secret about Kellum?
Sure.
Remember, she was in our one of our live shows, and she is the pinniped freak. So you might think about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, I don't make the decisions on who people get for saints.
The gods
That's
do.
just it comes from the gods. So I don't know why you're even telling me that.
Right.
But Kellum, yes, you do get a saint, and your saint is Saint Dig-em-up of what's over there. And Saint Dig-em-up is the patron saint of cool bony things, large, interesting. I don't know what a pinniped is.
It's a seal or a walrus.
Oh, right. Large, interesting tusks, and you really threw me for a loop on this one. And water skiing. Fuck you.
How did I should have suspected that you did not know the Latin name for every animal kingdom or every animal family? That's on you.
Do you think
I'll study harder for the next one.
Yeah.
Do you think she got into pinnipeds before she got the tattoos, or the other way around?
Sometimes you have to choose your career based on your body art.
She went into the tattoo artist and said dealer's choice. She was like, oh, fuck, okay, walrus, let's do this.
Thank
Career,
God
here I come.
He was in a pinniped mood.
Yeah, exactly. All right, and Uncle Mark, I need you to give a saint to Pause.
Pause. Oh, yes. Pause, of course, who we know, a dear friend of the show. Pause, you get Saint Nazi Puncher of No Fucks Left to Give a Stan, who of course is the patron saint of the exuberant madness of baby goats. Who doesn't love that?
Yes.
The first time a puppy discovers snow.
Oh.
And the person whose job it is to hit the pyro button every time a wrestler comes out on the WWE. Who wouldn't want that job?
That is what I aspire to.
Yeah, fuck yeah, man. So
right now I'm stuck on the air
it's
horn.
like that, and then Zamboni driver, and then yeah.
Did you guys see that burning Zamboni?
No. Oh wait, yes, I do remember.
It was insane. It was like on fucking fire. It was fire. It was amazing. I don't know.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, to all of these people, what they've done, ladies and gentlemen, who aren't them, is they went to howtoheretic.com. They clicked on the support us thing. They went and they signed up to be a patron. It makes them a better person. If you can afford it, I highly encourage it. You'll feel great about yourself.
Yeah, and if you can't do that, we really hope you can. If you can't, look, there's going to be a new stimulus. You're all going to have $1,200 to just sign the check over to us, send it our way. And if you can't do that, or you won't do that, do give us 5 stars. We've been getting some very nice reviews lately, and Dan has been selecting some to read on the show. We love it.
Yes.
It does, the algorithms do the rhythm that algas do, and bring more people to the table. And who doesn't want more people here at this big heretic table to join the Feast of Bullshit every week?
And this week's chosen review is from Spinoza's Godzilla. Thank you for the 5 stars. If you ever, Spinoza's Godzilla says, if you ever want to do another Lost Continent story, this is an interesting way. You can also just write to us, but go ahead and put it in the review.
Yeah,
if you ever want to do another Lost Continent story, I recommend looking into the Lost Kingdom of Mu. It started out as an alternative name for Lemuria, but went on to develop its own mythology. Some guy named Churchward even tried to pull a Joe Smith and, quote, discovered some ancient tablets only he could translate that no one else was allowed to see.
Nice.
It goes on from there, but that's a lovely. That's a way to get us to notice your suggestion. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
If you want to leave a review, do it, and
Do it.
and impress us with it. You never know, we might read it on the air.
Love ya.
Uncle Dan,
Yes,
you in a good mood?
I mean, I am right now.
Well, I think Uncle Mark's here to take care of that for you.
Fixing to ruin it for everybody, huh?
Yeah, this is how I view the holiday season, guys. So,
Oh, God.
so no cute lead-in with a wacky pop culture reference today. This is a terrible story, and I really couldn't make that many laughs out of this one. So I've actually been putting this topic off for a while, but I just felt like we needed to have a talk about this. So
You're too close. You should have let one of us do it. We would have made so much fun.
yeah, I did. I am too as the chief gay correspondent. I think it is my duty. However, so
Yes, indeed.
like we said in the intro, this segment is about the abuse, dehumanization, and in some cases, total destruction of perfectly healthy, innocent people for no fucking justifiable reason at all. This segment includes graphic descriptions of torture, brutality, humiliation, and suicide. These were directed against people in the LGBTQ spectrum and even those just suspected of being part of that spectrum. It's heartbreaking and hideous, so if you have any sensitivity to any of that subject matter, or heaven forfend if you yourself were subjected to any part of this program, please turn off the podcast now.
Yeah.
Bye.
If you continue to listen and are traumatized by the content, it's on you. This should serve as sufficient warning. No angry emails starting now. So, when we did the Anthill Kids segment a while back, as I was preparing it, I wondered about the ethics of even covering it on the show at all. Yes, it was a fucking nightmarish thing, but our mission statement as a show is examining the excesses of irrational thinking and belief, and both this story and that one are prime examples of the pointless human misery belief can cause. Now, the other reason I want to tell this story is that it's so fucking recent. Many who suffered in these programs are still alive, as are some of the people who engineered them. None of the guilty have paid any price or ever apologized, and the surviving victims have continued to suffer with no hope of justice or remediation. Pardon me. So, an hour south of our fair city is a place called Provo, Utah. I know. I also wish it wasn't true, but it is. And in Provo, Utah is Brigham Young University. For those who don't know, it was named after the second prophet of the Mormon Church and the true father of what modern Mormonism has become, Brigham Young. He was a cruel and unforgiving man, and as we shall see, the university that bears his name shares that DNA with him. So Mormonism from the end of World War II, and certainly before that, but just for our purposes here, from the end of World War II all the way through the Cold War, was almost an entirely Utah-based phenomenon. It was and still is a very inward-looking faith. Its highly inflated martyrdom mythos and its mountain isolation kept most outside ideas at bay, which they were very happy about. Young Mormon men were expected to finish high school, go on a 2-year mission while trying to notice as little about the fallen world they passed through as possible, come home, go to Brigham Young University, find a wife, get married, have kids, rinse, repeat, the circle of beige life, right?
Yeah.
Now, not quite as much these days, but definitely back then, for some Mormon kids, BYU was not an option, it was the option. Hyper-conservative parents knew that their children would not receive any sort of liberal education at BYU, and intense standards of, quote, morality and chaste behaviors are even today enforced there, as we'll explore in this segment. If you required your parents' help or even permission to go to college, BYU was often the only one you could go to. So a little about BYU's history with this. In 1962, BYU apparently suddenly realized there was such a thing as gay people,
Gross.
and established a total ban on them attending the university. In 1964, apostle and future prophet Spencer W. Kimball, a villain that will loom large in this story, gave a speech at BYU that said homosexuality was a malady, a disease, and an abominable and detestable crime against nature that was curable by self-mastery. In September of 1965, Then Brigham Young University President Wilkinson addressed the incoming freshmen with, "We do not intend to admit to this campus any homosexuals. If any of you have this tendency, may I suggest you leave the university immediately. We do not want others on this campus to be contaminated by your presence."
Oh, my God.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a very nice welcome speech.
Let's roll out that welcome mat. Also in 1965, The Advocate, a national LGBTQ news and advocacy magazine, reported on the suicides of 5 young gay male students that year who had been ensnared by snitches and surveillance and brought before a disciplinary council before their suicides. BYU, of course, had no comment on that. By 1968, the paranoid, bunkered church and university authorities, alarmed by the liberalization of American society in general and teeny tiny attempts at it on their own remote campus, went full Stasi, the East German secret police. If a student was turned in by his roommates, and it was almost always a he, it seems Mormons at the time couldn't wrap their heads around the idea of gay women. And trans people, baby steps, guys. Let them persecute people as they become comfortable enough to do it. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So anyway, if you were turned in for suspected homosexual activity on or off campus, this young man would find himself being interrogated by Apostle Spencer W. Kimball. He who happily reported that the church's cultural genocide program in Navajo country was turning natives white and delightsome. See episode 150 for that gem. Kimball would offer a choice: immediate expulsion from school and letters to the family explaining exactly why he was being expelled. And by the way, the expulsion often came with a hold on records, making transfer to another school with accrued credits impossible.
Oh, my God.
And also letting any other potential school know why you had been expelled. Or you could write down on a piece of paper the names of all the other queers in your disgusting little homo network for them to go after.
And I'm sure you're going to cover this, Mark, but the shame of being expelled from BYU it's hard to describe how devastating.
Even if it wasn't for being gay.
Right.
Even if you were just a fuck up or something and got expelled, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're being kicked out of God's school.
Well, I think there was always kind of the assumption for anyone who was kicked out that was why.
Right. And also know that if the region is what it is, and it certainly was worse at the time, but if you got expelled from BYU, a lot of career paths just closed to you in Utah, right? You're never going to be at this law firm. You're never going to get you're never going to be able to work at this insurance company. So it could fuck people up profoundly. So Kimball and the other leadership soon found themselves panicked to be hip deep in 76 known or suspected homosexual Mormon boys. It was obviously a purposeful invasion by the evil forces of Big Gay, rather than just a program of desperate young kids ratting each other out to try to save their own asses and their very lives.
Right.
As they say at BYU, snitches get cross stitches. Nice little crafts to hang in the powder room that say, "Good on ya, kid. Go Cougs." That's probably the only joke I can pull out of this segment, guys. So I'd appreciate a little more encouragement.
Go Cougs.
Before long, BYU was sending campus police, basically mall cops, 60 miles south to Salt Lake City to surveil the handful of gay bars here, looking for cars with BYU tags. They placed entrapment men-sinking men ads in Salt Lake City, want ads and newspapers to try to catch BYU students. Kids who had been turned in were sometimes made to wear wires to parties or events where gay people were suspected of being.
Oh, my God.
Bugs were placed in dorm rooms and on the phone lines of suspected gay kids.
Unbelievable.
A campus police whistleblower in the mid-1970s was horrified by these practices and was told it was totally standard work for the campus police department. He went public about it, and BYU's denial, not denial, was pretty hilarious. Jumping ahead a bit, but just to help illustrate the insanity of the anti-gay jihad at BYU, in 1975, plainclothes and undercover campus police swarmed the fine arts school, pulling all male ballet and drama students out of class and interrogating them publicly, Chinese Cultural Revolution style, in front of their fellow students. And,
holy shit.
And all but this last part was overseen and directed by Mormon apostle Spencer W. Kimball, not that last police raid, because by then he was the prophet and handed that off to somebody else.
Wow, that's incredible.
So, and it was all also overseen during the worst years of the gay purges and persecutions at BYU, and the horrors to come, the years being 1971 to 1980, by then University President Dallin H. Oakes. In 1976, partially as a reaction to the American Psychological Association delisting homosexuality as a psychiatric disorder, Oakes and church leaders decided something more concrete had to be done about the homosexual menace their fever dreams told them was hollowing out the church and BYU from the inside. Oakes and the church created the Orwellian-named Values Institute, a pseudo-scientific propaganda mill that would create, quote, scientific data to support their increasingly arcane and bigoted views on homosexuality. Its first goal was to assign BYU psychologist Alan Bergen to write a book to be published by a non-church publisher to give it an air of legitimacy, and to otherwise create academic papers to give scientific support to their hatred of gay people. Out of the Values Institute were born the infamous BYU electrocution, torture, conversion therapy programs. Quick note, BYU already had an aversion therapy program, as they called it, since 1960, so for 16 years by then. But the aversion therapy program was very much like the junk science and traumatizing techniques used in the conversion therapy program. It's kind of a difference without a real difference.
Right.
But instead of electroshock, powerful drugs were used to make people vomit and feel intense discomfort when they were shown gay pornography, and then other drugs to bring about euphoric feelings when shown straight pornography and images of chaste Mormon girls. One survivor of the aversion therapy program was just 15 when his bishop made him go through it, without his parents' consent or even knowledge.
Oh, my God.
Whoa.
The bishop told them he was going to a genealogy summer camp for a few weeks down at the BYU campus.
Holy shit.
So think about that. A confused and frightened 15-year-old kid who had never even seen pornography is shown graphic images of men fucking, given powerful and dangerous intravenous drugs that forced him to vomit uncontrollably without his parents' knowledge as a human medical experiment for his religion.
Wow.
And he was far from the only minor to pass through this hellscape. So in 1975, the vomit-inducing drug torture was replaced with, and according to a couple sources, sometimes combined with, electrocution. So how did this program with a 100% rate of failure work? Once your roommates ratted you out, or a mall cop 60 miles outside of his jurisdiction saw you leaving the old Radio City bar in Salt Lake, or Spencer W. Kimball had blackmailed a friend of yours into giving you up, you would be presented with a way to finish your degree and keep your little secret from your family, which was a course of weekly torture appointments in the basement of the psychology building. But first, you were required to procure pornographic images you found arousing. Now,
wow. You get to, it's like go pick a switch.
It's even worse than that. So for young listeners, in 1976, porn wasn't just a click away on your phone. You actually had to go to a sleazy adult bookstore or magazine shop, poke around till you found what floated your boat, then have the courage to let the cashier see what kind of thing gave you a boner. For many of these young guys who were devoutly Mormon, that alone was a traumatizing experience. Pornography is very verboten in the Mormon church. Then you had to take it to a specific camera shop in Provo in a plain manila envelope and use some code word when you handed it to the guy behind the counter so he could make it into slides at your expense to take to your own torture. So humiliation and dehumanization were very conscious elements of this, quote, therapy.
That's fucking insane.
It's insane. So now BYU officially denied this ever happened for years, only making a very partial and not very sorry admission in 2011, but for some reason still denied that drugs were ever used. They're like, oh yeah, we shocked the shit out of people, but we never used drugs.
Weird.
But at the time, they emphasized participation was voluntary. While I've already described the brutal coercions that drove people to cooperate, here's how one survivor answered when he was asked why he volunteered for the torture. Quote, seriously, you must be delusional. I did not volunteer for this. I was told I must do it, or all my confessions to church leaders would be shared with my family, local ward, and stake members, and I would be excommunicated. Not that it matters to me now, but as a young person, you are ingrained with the notion that you do whatever a church leader or authority says without question. Being from a small town in Utah, that could absolutely destroy a person's chance for work or being able to live in that community. I ended up going 1,500 miles away just to get away from this after it happened. After 36 years, I moved back to Utah, but the nightmares and flashbacks are coming back more vividly than I expected. So,
Wow.
Yeah. So much for fucking voluntary. Now, I should add, while participation in this horror was coerced, there were plenty of frightened, closeted gay kids that did want to change if there was some way to do it.
Right.
America at the time was hardly an ideal place to live out loud as a gay person, and the Mormon Church was worse by leagues. So sad as it is, some of these kids, as terrified as they were, as coerced as they were, they hoped it would work, right? So, back to how this was conducted. After you had gone to the photo shop to pick up your shaming slides, you reported to the basement of the psych building on the campus, and you would have to sign the following release in order for your, quote, voluntary torture to begin. And I got this from the BYU library, so anybody who thinks I'm making this shit up.
This was in there, like, is this like an artifact, or is this still...
This is part of, this release is part of a larger academic paper I'll talk about in a second.
Holy cow.
So it says, I, blank space, your name here, witness the fact that I have had explained to me all the various ramifications of experimental aversion techniques used to counter-condition inappropriate emotional propensities like those of my own. I fully realize that these procedures are experimental in nature of their design and application, and their application to me will likely produce a great deal of discomfort, and that, perhaps, tissue and organ damage could result.
Holy fuck.
My God.
Yeah. Nevertheless, I agree to allow Dr. D. Eugene Thorne and his clinical associates to administer these experimental averse techniques to me in any way their judgment would seem appropriate to therapeutic objectives. I also witness the fact that the visual, auditory, and other sensory modality stimuli used to counter-condition my inappropriate emotional propensities have either been provided by me or I have agreed to use them as directed by Dr. D. Eugene Thorne and his clinical associates. Some of these materials could be construed to be socially or morally offensive. Finally, I release Dr. D. Eugene Thorne and his clinical associates from all legal liabilities that could result from treatment provided me from them and from communication of my case to materials to other clinically oriented individuals. Then you would sign and date it.
Wow.
I love the wording that that all of this is a counter to inappropriate feelings.
Yeah.
It's about propriety, you guys. It's not about anything
Yeah.
pathological or harmful. Just inappropriate.
It's appearances, isn't it?
Well,
Like, it's like they knew they weren't going to change these people. They knew that they were just going to make them never act on their natural impulses.
right. And it has the sanitized language of John Hughes torture memos during the Bush years, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's super ugly. And I'd be very interested to hear from any legal, anybody, with like Andrew or somebody listening who could tell us if that thing actually could be enforced. So then you were led to a room, strapped to a reclining chair, and a device called a plethysmograph was attached to your penis. This is a highly sensitive electronic device that can detect arousal. Then electrodes were placed any number of places, upper arms, upper inner thighs, wrists, etc. I've read the academic paper that release was included in about how this was to be conducted by Max Ford McBride. And while the paper doesn't instruct clinicians to put a shocking electrode directly to the genitals, several survivors attest to that having been the case.
right.
So you were it sounds like there was a lot of freelancing with this
Well,
thing.
I mean, if it weren't so awful, if it were all actually voluntary, some of that sounds kind of sexy, actually.
Oh, God. I'm not going to touch that. So once you were all wired up, a psychology undergrad TA behind mirrored glass would begin to play the pornographic slideshow you had just paid for. When the it's a hard word to say, plethysmograph detected an increase in the size of your penis, the TA would deliver a shock lasting from 3 to 10 seconds.
Oh, my God.
And here's a detail I find particularly hideous in all this garbage. You yourself would choose the intensity of the shock.
Right.
The person strapped to the chair had a dial which could turn the voltage up or down, thus making the victim even more complicit in his own torture. Survivors recalled Dr. Thorne and his co-director of this program, Dr. Robert Dwayne Card, telling them it wouldn't work unless they used the maximum voltage. More on Card in a minute. But the higher voltages resulted in severe burns and physical scarring, brutal reminders for survivors to this day. So after half an hour or more of pain and terror looking at images and being electrocuted, the TA would switch to soothing music and images of heterosexual pornography or whatever they determined to be positive heteronormative images. In this incredibly simplistic, truly idiotic view of human sexuality and psychology, these religious quacks thought they could flip a switch by making gay bad and straight good with this bullshit therapy. In the words of the Mormon missionaries in the Book of Mormon musical, they thought they could just turn it off, right?
Right.
So perfectly normal, healthy young people endured this horror a minimum of 22 times, 22 sessions.
Wow.
More if the therapist thought it hadn't taken yet, and potentially substantially more.
And I got news for you. It hadn't.
Yeah, I'll get to the stats here in a minute.
Yeah.
It should be noted that the main record of this nightmare, the academic paper I mentioned by Max Ford McBride, which declares this a successful program, talks about a group of just 17 male subjects, quote, volunteering for this treatment, with 14 finishing it. The paper congratulates itself for being a smashing success, declaring that aversion therapy via humiliation, dehumanization, and electroshock torture works just perfectly. Thanks, everybody, but the credit really goes to Jesus. Hilariously, it declares itself a total success while admitting in the conclusion that there were only 14 subjects, all in the same age range, all Mormons, all from the same geographic region, and all male, and there was no long-term follow-ups to track behavioral changes. As clinical trials go, its metrics are a laughable disaster. But since torturous aversion therapies had been banned by the American Psychological Association, the American Medical Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics, BYU had to keep a lid on this evil. Like, they had to do this in secret.
So it had already been banned. It's not like they were doing something that everybody else was like,
I couldn't find the exact. I think it was right when they delisted homosexuality as a psychological disorder. Because
I know, like experimenting on human subjects, just as a concept within the psychiatric community, was banned like before the 60s, right?
No. There's all kinds of psychological experiments that can to this day continue, but they're done under certain ethical strictures, right? These were not. It seems like there was no ethical oversight of any kind. Including at BYU, right? As it happens, I know one of the TAs who participated in this conversion therapy program.
Really?
Yeah, and you know him too. And I know he's struggled with the weight of his guilt at having been part of it. He's in a documentary on the subject, and he knows a lot of the people who went through this, and just from his own experience calculates a 0% success rate. But as the victim of any sort of torture will tell you, you'll say anything to make it stop. So they all told Dr. Thorne and Dr. Card they were all better now, thank you very much. But the church had proof it worked, you see. At the completion of the course of the treatment, men would get a form letter from Spencer W. Kimball's office stating that they had been fully cured of gayness and were doing just fine as normal heterosexual Mormon men. It was intimated that this was your final condition of keeping your little secret secret. So what could you do? You signed it. Then Kimball would show all the signed affidavits of heterosexuality, closing the loop of total bullshit with a nice little bow. See, it works because we tortured and blackmailed people into saying it did. But as my friend noted in the documentary, if making gay men straight was the goal of the program, it failed spectacularly. If the goal was to pump out brutally traumatized torture victims who would spend most of the rest of their lives struggling with intimacy and in great pain, it was incredibly successful. Remember, the 14 people in the paper on the subject were just a small portion of men and women who suffered these programs over the course of 20 years. But because of the trauma surrounding it and the desire never to speak of it again, I was unable to find even a good estimate of the number of victims of this program. Several suicides followed immediately on the completion of the program, with 3 young men hanging themselves in the campus fine arts building in rapid succession.
Jesus.
While it's hard to know because of the lack of good data, scores of other suicides have been blamed on the program. Many survivors did as they were told and married somebody, anybody, so long as it was a woman, as quickly as possible, resulting in a huge number of strained and failed marriages, many with children, making this particular torture program brutalizing to a second generation as well. As one survivor put it pretty succinctly, marriage is the rug under which the brethren encourage many men to sweep their homosexuality. Advising the homosexual to marry is therapy at its worst and spiritual guidance at its most irresponsible. Most survivors' accounts that I read, and a couple of people I have personally known over the years who survived this, have a common thread, that being they were still never attracted to women after this, but their natural attractions to men are so associated with pain and trauma that they have struggled profoundly with intimacy and relationships, even just friendships with other men decades later. The quote I read a bit ago where the survivor talked about moving back to Utah and having debilitating flashbacks 36 years later speaks to the depths of the damage done, right?
Yeah.
While any record of the program has it stopping around the mid-1980s for fear of lawsuit, not out of a single lick of concern for the victims or even its failure rate, the Mormon appetite for making gay go away didn't abate even a little. They outsourced their anti-scientific quackery to an outside, wink, company called Evergreen, which swore it never did any sort of torture therapy, but rather rewired the gay and lesbian brain by having queers perform heteronormative behaviors out of the fucking 1950s. Women baked, wore makeup, braided hair, men fixed cars, played football, and watched the game. Seriously. But sometime recently, Evergreen got folded into another bullshit outfit, North Star, which I think is still out there scolding gay men for sounding too feminine or crying or whatever their quackery is.
Right.
I have a friend who is now, I think he's around 21 now, who as a teenager wanted to see a therapist for his depression, but the first thing the guy said to him was, "Why do you act so feminine? Men don't speak like that or cross their legs like that." Just like 5 or 6 years ago, this Mormon therapist decided depression wasn't my friend's problem, being gay was, and he found himself stuck in this quack's obsession with making gayness go away. And his parents were totally down with it. But my young friend got his revenge when he became the face of Equality Utah's successful advocacy campaign to have so-called reparative therapy for minors outlawed in Utah. So that's a good thing, trying to find some positive here.
Yeah.
Right.
But back to the bad old days at BYU. As I said, one of the main reasons I wanted to tell this story is that the wronged have never gotten anything for what was done to them. Not a fucking thing. In fact, the official position of the church in BYU has been until very recently, 2011, that none of this ever happened. Which is funny because the academic paper by Max McBride, laying it all out in gruesome detail and declaring it a rousing success, was in the library at BYU this whole time. You guys should be better at cover-ups by now, right?
Right.
But aside from that, some but not all of the guilty are still alive. Remember Dr. Card, one of the guys telling these poor kids the only way to really cure yourself was to turn it up to 11?
Yeah.
In a little poetic justice, the torturer of BYU died on the day Utah's ban on conversion therapy for minors went into effect.
Oh, no way.
On January 21st of this year. Sadly, according to his obituary, he did not die of electrocution. So, but that's something. And do you remember the president of BYU under the worst years of terror and persecution and electrocution of gay people, Dallin H. Oaks? Yep. Well, guys, he's still here. And any minute now, he's going to get a promotion to prophet, seer, CEO, president, and revelator of Mormonism, Inc. The current president and useless hashtagger, Russell M. Nelson, is 96 years old, and at a spry 88, Oakes, who has never apologized for his overseeing this campaign of terror, human experimentation, blackmail, and literal deaths, may have several years left to bring all he learned as the gay-hating Grand Inquisitor of BYU to bear on the young LGBTQ Mormons in his care. So that's nice. A recent University of Georgia study found that nearly 3/4 of all LGBTQ current and former Mormons likely meet the threshold for a diagnosis of PTSD. 3/4. Yeah. And that's from 2017. Another study found half of LGBTQ BYU students have seriously contemplated suicide. Imagine what those numbers would have been in 1976 if there was any sort of, the 1970s, if there was any sort of survey. Have things at BYU and in the Mormon Church improved for queer people since the 70s? I think you would have to say yes, but these stats say that Mormonism is still not remotely a safe place for my tribe at any age, even today. Post-Mormon therapist and podcaster John DeLynn did some research on the efficacy of the torture program and all the garbage programs that followed it, like Evergreen or North Star. He managed to get around 1,600 gay, current, and former Mormon men to respond to this survey. Around 1,000 of them, that's almost 2/3, said they had been in one or more program to change their orientation, trying for an average of 10 years.
Wow.
Want to guess how many of that 1,000 said they became straight?
I'm thinking of a number.
Not one.
It's not. Yeah. It's
fucking
not above
one.
0.
Oh, yeah, it's a south of 0 number. All the agony, the humiliation, the terror, the shame, the literal deaths these programs caused, all for total failure. I found a ton of really good and fascinating information in a long essay or short online book, I guess, about queerness in Mormonism by gay activist and historian and BYU conversion therapy survivor Connell O'Donovan. Do you know Connell, Dan?
No, I don't.
Fascinating dude. The essay called The Abominable and Detestable Crime Against Nature, A Revised History of Homosexuality and Mormonism, 1840 to 1980. It's so full of fascinating stuff. It's broad and madly detailed, but he ends his section on the BYU electrocution torture therapy program pretty succinctly, I think. He says, it is an excellent example of clinical dehumanization practiced by Mormon, quote, therapists. In the Mormon worldview, the end certainly justifies the means. Heterosexuality must be attained and maintained at any cost, emphasis his, even if it means using pornography, which the Mormon Church is usually vehemently opposed to, and physical torture. The end. So that is just a brief overview of what went on for 20 years or more at BYU using tithing funds.
Well, I hesitate to ask this question because I don't know if I want to know the answer. But it sounds like the machine for men detected blood rushing to the penis, right?
Yeah.
How did the one for women work?
It doesn't say. The paper doesn't discuss that. And I think the paper discusses outcomes for women, but it doesn't necessarily discuss how, I think they also monitored heart rate. And maybe they, galvanic response, like breathing.
They used an e-meter.
Yeah, basically an e-meter. But I don't know exactly. But there's a couple factors. Like in Mormonism, homosexuality is considered almost entirely a male condition.
Yeah, that's very true.
Right. And so women did go through this and were tortured, but it's really hard to know how many. So there's just not, for reasons that make sense, nobody wants to talk about this who survived it, right? So it's
So I'm the only uncle who actually went to BYU for 1 year.
Yeah.
And I can at least put the tiny feather in my cap that I never ever turned anybody in for anything.
That's good.
Yeah, it is good. I'm proud of that. But I remember the culture and being so snitch based.
Yeah.
And that people were turned in all the time. And it was you could still get expelled for homosexual acts. In fact, I think you still can.
Of course you can.
Yeah. Well, we talked about the honor code change. You did a segment on that, Doug, like earlier in the year, I think.
Yep.
right? Where they, for a minute, the honor code changed. The honor code is the horrible kind of, Leviticus of life at BYU.
Right.
And for a second, they changed it to look like you could actually, if you were gay, queer, you could date, you could show affection, and there was kind of this huge celebration. And then they had to come running back and say, oh, no, we didn't mean it. That's not what we meant at all.
Exactly.
Right. And so you can still be, if you see somebody doing something 100 miles from campus that you know is a BYU student, you can snitch on them, and that counts.
Well, and I remember there's student housing around BYU that is technically an extension of the campus.
Yeah.
And then there's, anywhere you live as a BYU student, you're still under the honor code.
Yeah, in a private residence.
And it has to be approved. It has to be BYU approved housing.
And that means that there's strict rules about, men and women, where they live, shared bathrooms, et cetera, et cetera. But BYU students would and the campus police would look in the windows. This is not that long ago.
Yeah, you were there in the 90s, right?
Yeah, they would look in the window to see things, and you having your blinds drawn was enough to get hauled before a disciplinary board.
Oh my God!
Because what are you hiding?
What the fuck kind of education do you want your fucking? I just don't understand the Mormon idea of the college experience.
Right.
I live in the Joseph Goebbels dormitory.
Yeah, you have to have the middle initial too, though, the Joseph J. Goebbels.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it's where college should be. This is, you want your kids to go off and broaden their minds and experiment and learn new things and become stimulated, and BYU clearly has always tried to be completely the opposite of that.
Well, or at the very least, not have electrodes strapped to their genitalia.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Fuck. And imagine, spare a thought for all the poor, your friend Mark, who I don't know who it is, so who participated in that as a graduate student. But,
I'll tell you off the air, because
of course,
yeah.
But just the three-dimensional damage that's been done by this program that persists even in the children of people who now got married
40 years later.
Because they had to. God.
Yeah. And nobody ever said sorry. Nobody ever said we shouldn't be doing this. They just got afraid of, they got spooked by possible lawsuits, so they just outsourced it to some other garbage quasi-Mormon program, right? So there you go, guys.
Thanks for
that. A Clockwork Purple.
Okay, you can start listening again now. All right. Let's leave that there.
Moving on.
Well, friends, that is it for this week's show.
If you survived it, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at howtoheretic.com.
Or if you are one of the strange men who kind of freaked out that lady with the baby, then split, you can leave us a voicemail about it at 903-88-HOW-TO, which is 903-884-6986. I'm also on Twitter at HowToHeretic.
And as always, thanks to our incredible patrons.
And as always, thanks to Cody Layton for editing this hot mess together.
And thanks to you, dear friends, for tuning in.
Bye, friends.
Ta-ta.